The gala felt like a scene out of a magazine. Everyone in tuxedos and gowns, looking perfect in a world that had nothing to do with me. I stood off to the side, clutching my drink, trying to look like I belonged, even though I felt like a fish out of water. Hannah was radiant as always, her attention split between mingling with her coworkers and managing every little detail of the event. Her colleagues, all smiles and designer labels, threw subtle jabs my way like it was part of the entertainment. One of them, a guy I vaguely recognized from her office, gave a sarcastic grin and asked, "How's the kept man life? You spend your days fishing and watching ESPN." Laughter rippled through the group, but I just smiled, nodding politely. It was one of those moments where I knew better than to react. Then Vince, the regional manager, strolled over, a drink in one hand and a lecherous smirk on his face. His breath reeked of whiskey as he slurred, "How's it feel to be the trophy husband? You do the laundry or just cash her checks?" I froze. His words hung in the air, cutting through the noise of the room. Everyone laughed, including Hannah. She didn't even flinch. The same woman I'd spent years with, who I thought knew me, didn't even look uncomfortable. The sting of it hit harder than I expected, but I kept my face neutral, finishing the last of my drink, and turned to the company's founder, who had been standing nearby. "How does it feel?" I asked, my voice steady. "To know that I own this building you're standing in." The laughter stopped like someone flipped a switch. For a split second, the whole room went still. The founder's face went pale, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Without another word, I turned and walked out. I didn't need to look back. I knew the words would linger long after I left. I didn't even make it halfway to the parking lot before I heard the click of her heels echoing behind me. It wasn't a sound I could ignore. Her steps, sharp and quick, were the kind that matched the fire in her voice when she finally caught up to me. "Wait, what the hell was that?" she demanded, her words clipped with confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. Panic, maybe. "What do you mean you own the building?" I didn't stop walking. I knew if I did, I'd lose my nerve. My hand brushed the door handle of the truck, but I didn't open it. I just stood there, my back to her, looking out at the row of expensive cars lined up in the lot, parked like they were made to be admired. "I own the whole block," I said, my voice even, like I was explaining the weather. "The office, the ballroom, the event space, all of it." Her silence cut deeper than anything else she could have said. Then she scoffed, a quick, short laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Are you serious? You're lying. You can't possibly own—" "I'm not lying, Hannah." I turned, finally facing her, the words coming out colder than I expected. "I bought the whole damn thing 3 years ago, through an investment firm. The building's mine." Her face twisted like I'd slapped her. She didn't understand, couldn't. She opened her mouth like she was about to argue, but then closed it. She wasn't angry yet, just confused, shaken even. But that quickly shifted into something else. "You're joking," she said, voice a little higher now. "That doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you have told me?" I wasn't in the mood for her questions. "You never bothered to ask, Hannah. You never wanted to know as long as the money kept coming in." The words were harsh, but they needed to be said. She needed to hear them. She blinked, the weight of it finally hitting her. "That's not fair," she shot back. "I trusted you. I thought we were—" She stopped herself, and for a second, I thought she might get it. But then she pressed again, her voice rising, desperate. "How could you keep something like that from me?" "Because you didn't care," I said, stepping closer. "You didn't want to know." "Not really. As long as you could go to work, show up at these events, live your perfect little life, you didn't care where the money came from." I could feel the anger building in me now. It had been simmering, but now it was spilling out, unfiltered. "It's always been about what I could do for you, not who I was." Her chest rose and fell with each shallow breath. I could see the panic creeping into her eyes, that familiar look of someone realizing that the world they thought they understood was starting to crack. "This is insane," she whispered, shaking her head. I don't believe you." "You don't have to believe me," I said, my voice rougher now. "The documents are all there, Hannah. You want to see them, I'll show you." Her face softened, a mix of disbelief and something like guilt flickering across her expression. She stepped back, her hand reaching for her neck, the way she always did when she was trying to process something that didn't fit the world she'd built around herself. "I don't know what's going on here," she said quietly. "I don't know who you are anymore. Maybe you never did, I said, each word punctuated with a weight I couldn't shake. Maybe it's time you figured it out. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and thick, and for a second I thought she might say something else, plead with me, ask for answers, beg for it all to be different. But she didn't. Instead, she just stood there, watching me with wide eyes, the silence stretching too long for comfort. And then, finally, she said something that cut deeper than anything she'd said tonight. You don't get to make me feel like this. Her voice was tight, her anger barely controlled now. You don't get to turn everything upside down just because you feel like being a... I didn't turn anything upside down, I interrupted, my own voice rough with frustration. I'm just showing you what's always been there. The difference is, you didn't care to look. Her face crumpled in something close to defeat, but she didn't cry. She never did. Instead, she turned on her heel and started walking back toward the building, her steps slower now, heavier. There was nothing else to say. I let her go, the sound of her heels clicking against the pavement echoing in the stillness of the lot. When I walked through the front door of the house, I didn't bother turning on the lights. The place felt empty without her, the way it always did after one of our silent fights. Her side of the bed was cold, and the stillness in the air made me feel more distant from her than I'd ever been. I passed the living room, the kitchen, and went straight to my office at the back of the house. I'd locked the room years ago, the filing cabinet hidden behind the bookcase. I only accessed it when I needed to, when I was planning something. The drawers had always been my business, my work, my life. No one else ever asked about it, certainly not Hannah. She never showed any interest in what was behind that locked door, and I didn't mind. I ran my fingers over the cold metal of the filing cabinet, the same way I'd done hundreds of times before. There was no thrill in it tonight, just necessity. The lock clicked open, and I pulled the drawer out. It slid smoothly, revealing the stack of documents I hadn't touched in months. It was a mess of ownership records, real estate deeds, and trust documents. My life in paper form. I scanned the top sheet, seeing the names of properties I'd acquired 5 years ago, properties I'd never mentioned to her. I had bought them at a fraction of their value, distressed, barely worth the trouble at first glance. The thing was, I didn't buy them for me. I bought them for her company, for the people who worked for her. The buildings were valuable enough, but more importantly, they were pieces of a much larger puzzle I was slowly putting together. I had them leased under market rates, keeping her company afloat while they pretended to be untouchable, flourishing in the world they had built. I hadn't wanted her to know. I hadn't wanted to reveal that I was the one behind it all. I knew she would have asked questions I didn't want to answer. I wasn't just the guy who stayed home while she went out into the world. I was the one keeping the lights on. Now, I was looking at the same papers, the ones I'd let her think she was in charge of. I wasn't going to hide behind this anymore. I was going to take control of it all. This was mine. All of it. I shuffled through the documents, stopping at a deed from the building where the GALA had been held. I knew that building inside and out. Knew the floor plans, the history, the legalities of its zoning. It was one of the first I'd purchased, a crown jewel in my quiet empire. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling until I found my lawyer's number. My finger hovered over the contact for a second. Then I pressed dial. The line rang twice before he answered. James, I need you to initiate ownership disclosures, I said without preamble, and set up a sit-down with the leadership team at the company. The sooner, the better. There was a brief pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him processing. He knew I didn't ask for meetings unless it was serious. You sure about this? I'm sure, I replied, my voice as calm as ever, even though a storm was brewing inside. They're going to find out what's been in front of them the whole time. I'm not playing games anymore. I'll get it set up. You want me to push for a meeting this week? Yeah, I'll be ready. I ended the call, set the phone down, and let out a long breath. The reality of what I was doing hit me harder than I'd expected. I wasn't just going to walk into that meeting and claim what was mine. This wasn't about taking control of the buildings. This was about taking control of everything. Everything she and I had built together. The lie that had been our life. I took one last look at the papers before sliding them back into the cabinet. This was the moment. I didn't know how things would unfold, but I couldn't walk away now. The next morning, I woke up early, sharp as a knife. I didn't waste any time getting dressed. I slid into a suit that Hannah didn't even know I owned. Tailored, dark, the kind that makes a statement without saying a word. I didn't need to overthink it. I was done with games. The high-rise office building where Hannah worked wasn't far from home, but when I parked in the lot and saw it looming ahead, I felt like I was walking into a whole new world, a world I'd built. I walked through the glass doors, the marble floors under my shoes echoing like a warning. The receptionist didn't even look up at first. When she did, her eyes widened and recognition flickered in them. The name on my business card had triggered something she wasn't prepared for. Excuse me, sir. Can I help you? She stammered, her fingers hovering over the phone. Before I could answer, she was dialing security. A part of me wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just kept walking toward the elevators like I belonged there. The elevator ride was quick, too quick for me to think twice. When the doors opened, I stepped into the lobby and walked toward the conference room. The founder, of course, was the first to come running. His face went ashen the moment he saw me. What the hell is going on? His voice was higher than usual, like he was trying to process something that didn't make sense. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. "Let's talk," I said, already walking past him into the boardroom. I didn't wait for him to catch up. I sat down at the head of the table, letting my suit jacket fall over the chair, leaning back like I owned the damn place, which, in a way, I did. The board members filtered in, clearly uncomfortable, glancing between each other like they were trying to figure out what was going on. The air was thick, but no one dared speak first. I didn't waste time. "I'm the majority owner of this company," I said flatly, watching their faces freeze. "And everything you think you know about this place, about your positions, is about to change." I slid a stack of papers across the table, reports I'd had compiled over the past few weeks, everything from financials to behavior at company events. I'd already done my homework. It wasn't just the real estate I owned. It was the culture, the problems hidden under the surface. I'd let it fester long enough. I pointed to a highlighted section in the report. Vince's comments about me at the GALA weren't the first, were they? Let's talk about his client dinners at casinos. Let's talk about what's been going on behind closed doors. I could see them start to squirm, their eyes darting away from the page. The founder tried to speak, but he was fumbling for words, like he'd been caught in a lie he couldn't untangle. I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't aware, I cut him off. But now you are. You've been too busy to notice the cracks in the foundation, haven't you? I'm going to fix them. I leaned forward, letting my gaze sweep over the board members one by one. Starting with Vince. I expect him to be dealt with immediately. The rest of you. You'll be receiving new lease terms soon. And let's be clear, if any of you think you can keep doing business as usual, you're wrong. The founder's face was pale now, his eyes wide with shock. I'm so sorry, he stammered. "I didn't know." "We didn't?" "I don't care," I interrupted. "I don't need apologies. I need action, and I expect it to start today." The room went silent, the weight of what I'd just said hanging like a shadow. No one spoke. They didn't know how to react. I wasn't the man they'd expected. I wasn't the punchline of their jokes. I was the one in control. "I'll be in touch with you all soon," I added, standing up, smoothing my jacket. I wasn't done here, not by a long shot. As I turned and walked out, the founder's voice followed me. "Wait, we can talk this through, right? There's no need for drastic measures. We can work together." I didn't stop. I just turned my head slightly, enough to give him a cold glance. Too late for that. The door shut behind me, and the sound was final. The fallout from the meeting was almost immediate. Vince was called into HR that afternoon. I didn't have to wait long before the word came through that he'd been suspended. It turns out he'd been billing client dinners at casinos, charging the company for extravagant nights out that weren't even close to legitimate business expenses. His little empire of lies crumbled fast when someone finally bothered to check the receipts. As the day wore on, more managers started disappearing, each one slipping away quietly, terrified of what I might uncover next. They were running scared. I could practically smell the fear. The text notifications on my phone buzzed non-stop with messages from a handful of them, all asking for meetings, all looking for an exit. They didn't know what else I had, and they didn't want to find out. I didn't feel sorry for them, not even close. Then there was the one message I wasn't expecting. Hannah. "What the hell are you doing?" Her words hit me like a slap, sharp and accusing. It was as if she suddenly realized what I'd been up to, and she didn't like it. I could feel the anger rising, but I didn't let it show. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the city below. I was on top of it now. "Owning what's mine," I replied, sending the message before I could second-guess myself. A few seconds later, the phone buzzed again. She'd seen my response, but she didn't answer. I didn't care. I wasn't about to explain myself. Instead, I turned my attention back to the company. The leadership needed fixing, and it was on me to make sure it didn't fall apart. I started drafting new leadership standards and ethics policies, making sure everything was in black and white, clear expectations, no gray areas. The old guard had failed. It was time to build something that actually worked. I could hear the noise outside my office, people talking, whispering. The atmosphere felt different. People were on edge, wondering what the hell was going to happen next. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to back down. Around mid-afternoon, I took a break from the paperwork to head down to the maintenance floor. I was looking for someone who wasn't part of the suits or the politics, someone who had been here long before the fancy gala events and the corporate games. That's when I found Janet. She'd been with the company since the building opened, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had seen it all. She'd always kept to herself, working quietly behind the scenes, fixing things, making sure everything ran smoothly without asking for recognition. She wasn't the kind to chase promotions, but she deserved one. I caught her in the back office sorting through old inventory reports. She didn't notice me at first, but when she looked up, her eyes widened a little, as if she was surprised to see me standing there. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her coveralls, ready to apologize for something she hadn't done. "Don't worry about it," I said, cutting her off before she could say anything. "Listen, Janet, I've been looking through some stuff, and I want to talk to you about something." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't speak, waiting for me to continue. "I'm making some changes around here. Starting with leadership, I want you to take a step up. I'm offering you a promotion, Community Development Supervisor, effective immediately." She blinked, confused. "Me? Are you serious?" I nodded, my gaze steady. "You've been here longer than most of them, and you actually do the work. I want people who know what real work is, not just people who know how to make a good impression." She shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just think about it. I want you on the team." There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "I never thought anyone noticed me down here." "I've been watching," I said, my voice low. "I know exactly what's been going on, and I'm not going to let people like you get overlooked anymore." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded slowly, a mix of gratitude and hesitation in her eyes. "All right then. I'll give it a shot." I left her to think it over, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. She was the kind of person I wanted in charge, the kind who didn't need the spotlight but deserved it anyway. The old guard didn't get that, but I did. As I headed back to my office, I checked my phone again. No new messages from Hannah, but that was fine. I had bigger things to focus on now. And whatever she thought of me, whatever she thought of what I was doing, I was done hiding. That night, I walked into the house, expecting the silence to swallow me up. But when I opened the door, there she was, standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her face set in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. I could feel the anger rolling off her in waves, and for a moment, I wondered if she was going to scream. It wasn't the kind of silence that made you comfortable. It was the kind that made you realize things were about to fall apart. "Is this how it's going to be now?" Her voice was cold, sharp. "You embarrass me in front of everyone, you destroy everything I've worked for, and now you expect me to just act like it's fine." I didn't answer right away. There wasn't anything I could say that would make her feel better. Not right now. But I wasn't backing down, not after today. "You made me look like a fool," she continued, stepping closer. "All of that, everything I've built here, you just tore it down in front of everyone." Her voice shook with frustration. "You've destroyed my standing, my reputation." Her words hit harder than I expected. She wasn't just angry, she was devastated. I could hear the weight of her disappointment, and it cut deeper than any insult. But it wasn't about what she'd lost. It was about what I had done to her carefully constructed world. I took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. "Why did you laugh when they called me a joke?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "Why didn't you defend me when Vince made those comments?" She flinched, like I'd thrown something at her. "It was just a joke, okay? I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't make it weird." "Couldn't make it weird," I repeated, disbelief leaking into my tone. "You were too busy laughing to realize how bad it was. You didn't even try to stop it." "I didn't know what to do," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're not some some joke. But in that moment, what was I supposed to say? How was I supposed to react when everyone was laughing, when I was already so far in? "You never tried to find out, did you?" I said, stepping closer to her. "You never wanted to know how I made my money or what I really did all day. As long as it was there, you didn't care." Her eyes widened with surprise, her mouth opening as if she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just looked at me, her face slowly crumbling. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice quieter now, almost ashamed. "I never asked because I didn't want to know. I just wanted things to stay easy." I let out a harsh breath, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I wanted you to love me, even if I had nothing," I said, my voice tight. "I wanted you to care about who I was, not just what I could do for you." Her face softened for a second, like she was going to say something, but then she shook her head. "I'm sorry. I should have seen it. I should have known." I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of everything hanging in the air. "You weren't sorry until it hurt your image," I said, each word cutting through the space between us. "You didn't care until it became about you. Don't pretend like this is about me. It's about you and how you look in front of your colleagues." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked broken, like she didn't know how to fix what had been shattered between us. "I can't keep pretending I'm something I'm not," I said quietly, the anger in my chest giving way to something heavier, resignation. "You're not the person I thought you were, Hannah. You never were." Her shoulders sagged, the fight leaving her as quickly as it had come. She turned away from me, walking toward the living room, but before she could say anything else, I spoke again, softer this time. "I'm done with pretending too." She stopped, her back to me, but she didn't turn around, not this time. I moved my office downtown, into a smaller, quieter space. It wasn't flashy or impressive. It wasn't meant to be. I'd had enough of the high-rise and all the things it symbolized. I wanted a place where I could focus on what actually mattered now, not the smoke and mirrors I'd built before. The first day I walked into the office, the employees looked at me like I was an outsider. It's funny how quickly people notice when the boss starts showing up in the trenches. I didn't make a big deal of it. No grand entrance, no speeches. I just started showing up to staff meetings, asking questions, listening. I didn't want them to think I was there just to swing a wrecking ball through everything they'd known. The shift was gradual, but it was there. At first they were tense, unsure of what I was doing. But after a few weeks they started warming up to me. There were more smiles in the halls, more conversation in the break rooms. The receptionists were no longer stiff when they greeted me, and even the janitors started nodding when I passed. They could tell I wasn't here to tear things down. I was here to build something better. I held weekly open meetings, just small sessions where anyone could come in and talk about what was going on in their department. At first they were hesitant. They didn't think anyone cared enough to listen. But after a few weeks I could see them slowly opening up. They began to trust me, or at least they started to believe that I wasn't just another suit with a clipboard. I was there for them, for the real work, the things that mattered. One of the people who caught my eye was Rosa. She was a part-time assistant who'd been around for years, quietly doing her job while the higher-ups passed her over. She always had this look about her, like she was capable of more, but had never been given the chance to prove it. Every time I asked her a question, she responded with a sharp, thoughtful answer, her background, a master's degree in urban planning, and yet she'd spent years filing papers and answering phones. I finally asked her to stay after one of the meetings, and we talked for a while. She was humble about it, but I could tell she had a fire inside her. She'd been overlooked for too long, pushed into a corner where no one saw her potential. "I've been waiting for something to change," she said, almost embarrassed. "I didn't think it was going to happen." "Well, it's happening now," I told her, leaning forward. "You've been here long enough to know the ins and outs of this place. I'm offering you a promotion, Community Development Coordinator, effective immediately." Her eyes went wide, and for a moment, I thought she might laugh. But she didn't. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," I said. "I'm not looking for more people who want to climb ladders for the title. I want people who know what it means to do the work. I've watched you, Rosa. You've got the vision. You're going to make things happen." She sat there for a second, processing it, and then nodded slowly. "Thank you. This is a lot to take in. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," I said. "Just know that you earned it." I left her to digest it, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Rosa was a good example of what this place had been missing. People who weren't just looking for their next promotion, but people who were invested in the work, in the real stuff. I was starting to see that there were people here who cared, people who were worth fighting for. At home, things were quieter. Hannah had been avoiding me. It wasn't the kind of avoidance that felt like we were on the verge of making things work. It was the kind that said we were just two people passing through the same space without saying a word. She didn't come to the office anymore. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't seem to care. I didn't push it. I wasn't going to beg her to talk to me. I had my hands full with everything else. And the way things had been between us, I knew there was nothing I could say that would fix it. She had her world, and I had mine now. Maybe that was the way it had to be. The quiet rebuild had started, not just at the company, but in my own life. Little by little, I was figuring out how to move forward, even if I didn't know exactly where that would lead. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a room full of people, ready to announce something that would shape the future of the company, and my own. The board was with me, fully on board with the idea, despite the uncertainty that had hung over us all before. It wasn't just about buildings anymore, it was about purpose. I'm proud to announce the creation of the My Name Urban Youth Housing Foundation, focused on providing affordable housing internships, education, and pathways into careers in real estate and architecture, I said, my voice steady, but carrying the weight of something much bigger than any project I'd undertaken before. There was a ripple through the room, not just from the board members, but from the staff. They looked inspired, like something had sparked in them that they hadn't even realized was missing. For the first time, they were seeing the broader picture. This wasn't just about rebranding or building a legacy. This was about giving back, creating opportunities for kids who hadn't had a chance, for people who didn't have the networks or connections to break into the world we'd taken for granted. Rosa, who had been an integral part of organizing the foundation's first scholarship outreach, sat beside me. Her eyes gleamed with a quiet pride that I hadn't seen in a while. She was more than ready to take this on, her mind working fast, figuring out how to move it forward. It felt good to see someone so invested in it, someone who understood the long-term impact. She was a quiet leader in her own right. As the press event approached, I made sure everything was in place. I'd never been big on attention, at least not the kind that made me feel like I was on display. But today, it was about more than me. It was about what this foundation could do for the community, for people who were just like I had been at the start, overlooked, unnoticed, struggling to find their place. The press conference was held at the community center, a place that felt right for the moment. People filled the seats, reporters milling around with cameras, and I could feel the weight of the moment. The tension in the air wasn't just from the cameras. It was because this was real. There were kids in the room, kids who would one day have opportunities because of this. I gave my speech trying not to focus too much on the cameras or the way my hands shook slightly as I spoke about the purpose of the foundation. I talked about legacy, about making a difference in a world that felt too often like it cared more about profit than people. I could feel the eyes of the audience on me, but in that moment, it didn't matter. This was what I'd been building toward all along, and then, as I wrapped it up, I couldn't help but notice Hannah standing off to the side. She hadn't made a scene. She hadn't tried to insert herself into the spotlight. She was just there, watching quietly. It was almost like she was studying me from a distance, not sure of what to make of the man standing in front of everyone, talking about something bigger than either of us. She looked different, so different from the woman I'd been with before. I could see her trying to process it, trying to figure out where she fit into this new world I was creating. But she didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, still, her gaze fixed on me. The event wrapped up, and people came up to shake my hand, congratulate me, ask about next steps. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she stood off to the side, like she was part of a world I didn't belong to anymore. I didn't approach her right away. I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't sure if she had anything to say to me either. All I knew was that the foundation wasn't just about changing lives, it was about giving me a new sense of purpose. And maybe, just maybe, it was about figuring out how I could finally move past the woman who had never seen me for who I really was. The company's year-end dinner was being held at the same venue where I'd been humiliated months ago. The ballroom was bathed in gold lighting, the same glossy marble floors and towering windows I'd walked across that night when I'd decided to walk out. It felt surreal to be back, but this time, the laughter wasn't directed at me. The tension was different. Less about status, more about recognition. I stood at the front, a quiet sense of control settling over me as the new CEO spoke about the future of the company, then turned to thank me. "Without your vision and leadership," he said, voice steady, "this company wouldn't have the foundation it does now." A polite round of applause followed, but it felt genuine. There was no smirk in the room, no jokes behind my back. Janet and Rosa were called up next, both receiving awards for their contributions. Janet, in particular, looked shocked as she stepped forward. I could see the gratitude in her eyes as the crowd cheered. She deserved it more than anyone. Then, it was my turn. I stepped up to the podium, taking a moment to let the applause settle. I wasn't about to make a grand speech. I wasn't that guy. But I knew I had something to say. "You never know who you're standing next to," I said, my voice quiet but firm, letting the weight of the words sink in. "You never know who's really carrying the load, doing the work, or just waiting for the right moment to show up. I'm proud of what we've built here, but more than that, I'm proud of the people who've been with me all along, the ones who never got the recognition, the ones who did the work without asking for anything in return." People nodded, and the applause felt real this time. There was no pretense. These weren't the same people who had laughed behind my back. These were the ones who had stuck around, seen the changes, and felt the shift. The moment felt right. But as I stepped down from the stage, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished yet. I walked away from the podium only to feel someone's presence behind me. It was Hannah. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, quiet. She wasn't in her usual designer dress this time. It was something simple, understated. For a second, she looked almost out of place. "I need to talk to you," she finally said, voice low, tentative. I gave her a nod, not sure what to expect. She didn't hesitate to speak once I looked at her. "I'm stepping down," she said, her eyes holding mine for the first time in what felt like months. "I'm leaving the company. I'm taking a job in nonprofit consulting." It hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just walking away from her career. She was walking away from everything we'd built, everything that had kept us in this orbit for so long. I stood there, trying to process it, but I already knew what was happening. "You were right," she added, her voice breaking just a little. "I never really saw you. Not the way I should have." I didn't say anything right away. There wasn't much left to say. "I don't think you ever did," I replied, my tone steady. Not bitter, but not forgiving either. She nodded, like she understood that. And then she looked away, taking a small step back. The crowd around us continued to chat, unaware of the conversation unfolding in the corner. I could feel the weight of her words, the finality of them, but even then I wasn't sure what to feel. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, but this time I didn't follow. There was nothing left to chase. I drove home from the dinner alone. No music, no calls, just the sound of the tires on the pavement and my own thoughts filling the silence. The city lights blurred past as I passed the familiar streets, but nothing felt familiar anymore. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind you get when everything is shifting and you don't know where it's going yet. I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd paid off 10 years ago, the house that had been a symbol of stability, of success. Only now, it felt more like a reminder of everything I'd put on hold. Everything I'd been ignoring while I played the part everyone else expected me to. Inside, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and went straight to my study. It was the only room that felt like it still belonged to me. My fingers ran across the desk, over the letter from Rosa, thanking me for believing in her. I hadn't read it in a while, but tonight it hit differently. She was the future, people like her. She was someone who understood what it meant to do the work, not just to climb the ladder. On my desk sat a photo from the scholarship ceremony, one of the kids from the first class standing proudly in front of their first home design model. The kid was wearing a hoodie, hands shoved into the pockets, but there was a spark in their eyes, something real, something worth fighting for. That was the kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about what came next. Not just real estate, but real impact. Something that didn't fade when the checks cleared or when the deals closed. Something that mattered. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. Hannah's side of the bed was empty. She was staying at her sister's place for now. I hadn't heard from her since the dinner. I wasn't sure what we were anymore. I wasn't sure if we'd make it. But I knew one thing. I was done being the joke, done being the man behind the curtain. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I didn't know if that would include Hannah, but I was done letting people laugh at the man they thought was weak. The world had a way of showing you who you were if you let it. Now I was showing it back.